I've got to tell you, the writers for this season of Federal Apprentice really outdo themselves every single week. You would think that the story can't get any more ridiculous or out there, and then they turn around and they make it more ridiculous and out there. And I woke up this morning to yet another twist in the story that definitely made me laugh and definitely gripped the entire country in a new wave of outrage and excitement. Early on Saturday morning, I found that all of my friends were commenting on a tweet that Alyssa Milano had put out probably the night before. The tweet seems to be in response to the heartbeat bill that Brian Kemp just signed into law down in Georgia, and it read like this: Our reproductive rights are being erased. Until women have legal control over our own bodies, we just cannot risk pregnancy. Join me in not having sex until we get bodily autonomy back. I'm calling for a hashtag sexstrike. Pass it on. As anybody who was paying attention to the news or Twitter at all on Saturday already knows, this tweet caused major backlash from both sides, a lot of reactions from both sides, both positive and negative. And we're going to look into that in just a bit. But first, let's take a look at the bill that spawned all of this. Now, as I mentioned before, this all seems to have begun because Georgia passed a law that bans abortion at 6 weeks. The rationale behind the law and the reason that it's called the heartbeat bill is because it bans any abortion after a noticeable heartbeat can be detected, which is usually at 6 weeks of development. And, of course, this has caused some major backlash. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of the most notable backlashes to this idea, stating the fact that at 6 weeks, a woman is just barely 2 weeks late on her period, and this is just a backdoor way to ban all abortions. Now, in years past, Hollywood has been moving some of their operations over to Georgia. They've both been looking for new backdrops to film against, and they've been looking to escape some of the high taxes of California. But with that happening, there's been some controversy over some of the more conservative policies of the state of Georgia, especially given the fact that many of the celebrities that are going to be filming over in Georgia do lean and vote and support the left in this country. And part of the reason that this has become controversial, especially with these celebrities, is the fact that they don't want to reward Georgia with any of the tax revenue or any of the money that they would spend both from Hollywood and just in their personal lives if Georgia is going to put a bill like this into place and impose this on the citizens of its state. In short, Hollywood celebrities are trying to use their money and influence and the amount of money that they could put into the economy of Georgia to try and influence them away from the more conservative values that they've held for a very long time. And knowing some of the people from Georgia that I know and knowing the way that Georgia seems to be on paper, I don't think this is going to work. And in fact, I think the people of Georgia are going to call the bluffs of the Hollywood celebrities and ask them to leave or allow them to leave if they threaten. But with that being said, let's move on and take a look at some of the reactions to this tweet from both sides. Now, many people on both sides have had favorable and opposing reactions, and it's been surprising how mixed this has actually been. Thousands of responses have come from the typical players, and the left is very supportive of the idea of Milano's sex strike, and the right has been more mocking this, and we'll cover that in just a little bit. But there have been some unexpected reactions from notable people on the left as well. A fellow YouTuber, simply known as Shu, seemed to have one of the funnier responses that I saw in this entire thread. I actually had to read it again and look at Shu's profile to note the fact that Shu is actually a Bernie and Tulsi supporter, but this surprised me nonetheless, and it actually made me laugh. So let's look at what Shu had to say. No sex is what the pro-life types have been preaching for decades as a solution for unwanted pregnancies. Did 4chan come up with this and you all fell for it, or what? Now this clearly points out the obvious, and on the case of Milano's tweet, when I first saw many of my friends and followers retweeting her original tweet and commenting on it as well, the first thing that I thought was about the same thing that Shu thought and posted in this. I thought that this was faked somehow, or that Milano's account had been hacked, or that this was a troll or a parody account out there that was about to get shut down. I had to look at this 3 or 4 times to realize that this was actually Milano's account. And in all honesty, this does seem like a complete prank, and this doesn't seem like anything that somebody over on the right would do. But this also lends to a very heterosexual and cisgender approach to everything. And Twitter user Lindsay Wheatston also pointed this out when she reacted to Milano's tweet. Let's see what Lindsay has to say. Whew, conservatives laughing while totally missing the point about the hashtag sexstrike. We were never going to fuck you. This is about motivating the decent men in the world to get out there and kick all the so-called pro-life laws and their creators out on their asses. Now, according to Lindsay's Twitter profile, she's not completely straight. I don't know all the details of it, nor do I care to. What goes on in Lindsay's bedroom is her own business, and I feel the same way about most anybody I could cite as well, but Lindsay does bring up a good point. It kind of lends to a tweet that I found that may have been the original tweet that spawned all of this, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But Lindsay also brings up a good point. Many of the people who were in support of Milano tweeting this out had no interest in copulating with any conservative to begin with, and the fact that conservatives were jumping on this and trying to mock people for all of this, while they're going a different direction, obviously, and that can be clearly pointed out the way that Lindsay tweeted. But the other side of this, of course, is the fact that Lindsay and her supporters are only going to be punishing the men that support them and their ideas. They're not going to be punishing people over on the other side. The hopes is that if they punish the people over on their side enough, that they will rise up and try and take back the government and try and eliminate some of these laws. But I don't think that's going to happen. I'll talk about that in a moment, but let's have a look at the tweet that I think may have spawned all of this that showed up a day before Milano put her tweet out. The day before Milano put out her infamous tweet, I actually found this tweet from a former Democratic candidate for Florida's 18th Congressional District, Pam Keith. And it carries a lot of the same undertones as Milano's tweet, but it didn't have quite the same backing as a Hollywood actress would have. So I think for the most part it went almost under the radar and nobody noticed it. But I'm sure that this did inspire some of what Milano had to say. Let's see what Pam has to say. Ladies, stop having sex with conservative men. Total, complete sex boycott. Don't let them anywhere near you. Give them the hand and keep it moving. Get a BOB, which is battery-operated boyfriend, but make it a rule to run, not walk, from men who would want to steal your agency over yourself and your life. That's it. Now, of course, Pam Keith believes the same as Milano does, that she has found a way to punish conservative men, especially the ones who would have the gall to propose a bill like this, the ones who would support it, and the ones that would get it passed through a legislature and get signed into law. But when you look at something like this has the tremendous potential, A, to backfire against the plans of everybody, and B, just to make a spectacle out of something that was never going to happen in the first place. Now, when we look at the reality of things like this, the first thing we have to look at is the fact that Pam Keith and, by extension, Alyssa Milano both suggested the fact that conservative men are dangerous. And ask any parent out there who has a teenage daughter and a neighbor who is a younger-ish guy who has either a fast car or a motorcycle. Telling your daughter that somebody is dangerous is going to work exactly in the opposite direction that you plan for it to do. So, yes, go ahead. I encourage you to make all conservative men, especially the ones who want to be monogamous, take a woman in and marry her and make an honest woman out of her. Make them the dangerous ones, because you're going to be changing the dynamic of this country in a hurry. All you're going to do is drive all of your allies into the arms of these now dangerous men. But to take this a step further, let's actually have a look at who this is actually punishing. And I mentioned this just a bit when I talked about Lindsay's tweet just a little bit earlier. And that's the fact that the only people who are really going to be drawing repercussions from this are the allies of the women who are going on the sex strike. As Lindsay pointed out, these women are not going around and sleeping with conservative men, especially in this polarized country. Nobody wants to cross sides. Nobody wants to raise a family with somebody from the other side. And people are actively being encouraged not to mix ideas or mixed policies. So all you're doing is pushing away a group of men who want to do nothing but please you and do whatever that you say. Conservative women are not going to be falling into this. So on the left side, all you're doing right now is growing a new generation of incels, and these incels are going to get frustrated given the fact that they're not going to have a release, and they're going to turn the same direction as many other incels in this country do. They're going to go to the internet, they're going to go to message boards, they're going to start conversing with each other, and they're going to start getting radicalized. You're going to raise a new generation of MGTOW, people who aren't willing to have sex with women because they think that it taints their ability to think clearly and their ability to usher in a revolution. You start to change men into these kinds of people, and you start to lose some of your allies over on the left because, for the most part, many of the MGTOWs that I see out there do lean over to the right, sometimes to the dangerous levels of the right, and that's something that people like Pam Keith and Alyssa Milano have to think about when they're trying to encourage their followers not to sleep with anybody because they don't have some sort of bodily autonomy to do so. The only people that they are hurting are people on their side, and the only cause that they are hurting are their own. Conservative women and conservative men are going to continue to intermingle with each other, whether in a committed relationship or just going out and hooking up, and the only people who are going to be left out in the cold are left-wing men who are allies of the feminists. Before I close this, I want to put a pair of tweets that I found together up on the screen, and I'm not going to read them out loud, but I do want to talk about the end result of some of the more radical ideas that are coming from this entire sex strike. And that's the idea that the women want to turn this around on the men. They think that not being able to have an abortion is the same as trying to castrate a generation of juvenile men. And that's evidenced in these two tweets in which the posters insinuate that they want to mandate a vasectomy for anybody over the age of 12 and allow that vasectomy to be reversed if the men grow up, decide that they want to have a committed relationship and children, and they pass either a sociological or a psychological test to do so. And that's an Orwellian thought, and I see more and more Orwellian thoughts coming from our friends over on the left. Simply put, when you look at things like this, the first thing you have to remember is the fact that responsibility starts at the individual, and it can't really be mandated by the government. No matter how much the advocates of bigger government try to mandate responsibility from the government, it always starts at the individual. But on the other side, we need to build a society in which abortion is almost completely unnecessary, except in the most extreme cases. What do you think about Alyssa Milano's sex strike, and will you be participating? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comments section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at edsblog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.
You're always there for me in my best hour.